Welcome to Football Outsiders Live. I am your host, Aaron Schatz. We are coming at you live on Twitch exclusively every Monday at 1 o'clock Eastern Time to review weekend games and preview Monday Night Football. So we're going to be broadcasting live every day during the week, 1 p.m. live every weekday. All of our shows will be available afterwards on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app under the title Football Outsiders Podcast Network. With me today to review the Week 2 NFL slate of games is Ian O'Connor, Senior Data Analyst at EdjSports. Ian, how did your teams do this weekend?
1 for 2 so far. I got a little bit of a kind of a weird set of teams with the Browns won. Got that first win after the letdown last week against the Chiefs, kind of blowing that game a little bit, but it's the Chiefs, so can't be too mad. They got the Packers going tonight. Hopefully Aaron Rodgers can turn things around. Hopefully the whole team can look even a little bit better than last week, because that was just a dreadful experience.
I have a feeling playing Detroit, it's not going to be too difficult.
I hope so. I know on our podcast tweeted earlier, we talked about how it seems like got to talking, like Aaron Jones seems to shred the Lions, and got to think about it. Devontae Adams, Aaron Rodgers, seems like they just always put up some crazy numbers against the Lions. So a good way to get on track.
We'll talk more about that in a little bit, but before we dive right into recapping the biggest plays from Week 2 and the most impactful plays from Week 2, I want to remind everyone, you can join us live for these shows on Twitch. You can ask questions to me, Ian, any of the other Football Outsiders hosts and guests throughout the week if you join us live. You want to be here live on Twitch for the chat room. Also, be sure, if you are joining us live on Twitch, to click that subscribe button to make sure you get show alerts. And if you're listening to us afterwards, please make sure to subscribe to the Football Outsiders Podcast Network on your favorite podcast app. Please rate us so other people can help find the shows. We're going to have great football content coming your way every day. And if you subscribe to us, you will not miss a thing. Now, with that out of the way, let us pull into a Week 2 recap. All right. We started the week with another exciting finish to Thursday Night Football. My notes say was not a good game, but I actually think it was a pretty good game. Just because it's the NFC East does not mean we should write these things off as bad games. I thought it was a good game. It was exciting. It was close the whole way. It had interesting decisions. It had, plays that just missed, like that deep shot to Darius Slayton, and it was a good finish. So, Ian, what were some of the things that EdjSports saw in the Thursday night Giants-Washington game?
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily the best football, like you said, but, still it was a good game. It was an entertaining game. It was a lot of fun. But yeah, Ron Rivera had one of our best play calls of the week coming into the second quarter, actually. After struggling a bit last week, he decided to go for it on 4th and 1 from the Giants' 39-yard line instead of kicking the field goal. They were down 7-0 at the time. This was the correct decision. It added about 5% in win probability prior to the snap, which is a pretty good amount for a first half decision. They converted on the play as well. And then later in the game, Washington actually had our third most impactful play of the week. If it wasn't for the top 2 plays, which we'll get to later, a lot of weeks, this would be the top decision of the week at a 46.3% decrease on Taylor Heinicke's interception late in the game with 2:22 left. They were up by 1. The Giants ended up playing that, it seemed, pretty conservatively. Didn't really seem like they were going for a touchdown, which was a bit surprising to me. But as far as the numbers go, there was a 46.3% loss in win probability for the Washington football team.
Yeah, I mean, that was a huge interception for Heinicke. And I think he showed by coming back on the next drive what we call technically in the analytics community balls of steel. It was really good. Heinicke is interesting because you don't have high expectations for an undrafted quarterback who's bounced around 5 different practice squads. But this is now the 3rd good game that Taylor Heinicke has had as the starter for Washington. He has a 12% passing DVOA over 3 games, including week 17 of last year. It's actually 4 games, because week 17 of last year, the playoff game, and then the little bit that he played in week 1, and then week 2 of this year. One of the hardest things to figure out is when you stop thinking of new players as new players. Like, at what point, like, how many games of Taylor Heinicke doing this does it take before we decide this is his true level of play? And we shouldn't decrease Washington, for example, like in our playoff odds report, because they're using a backup quarterback. I mean, to give an example that Washington fans will understand, Kyle Allen, when he was with Carolina, he's now Washington's backup. But he was really hot too in his first 3 games. And then he cooled down substantially. So, like, you don't want to make the call too early that Heinicke is really good, but that he seems to be better than what your expectations would be for an undrafted quarterback. So I think that's sort of an interesting question going forward for Washington.
Yeah, and he's looked really good, like you said, in 4 games, his first 4 starts, especially in that kind of in the big moments. You'd think, in the playoff game, he might crumble, but he took the Bucks basically to the brink in that one. It gave them a little bit of a scare there towards the end. So it'll be interesting to see, like you said, how he continues to keep that up.
He's definitely been helped by his receivers because he's been a bit inaccurate, but his receivers have shown, good catch radius. Terry McLaurin, of course, is awesome. So,
and he had the awesome touchdown run against the Bucks, that Superman diving.
Oh, that Heinicke had. Yeah, that was fantastic. Yes. All right. So that was Thursday night. Now let's talk about Sunday night. We're doing all the island games here. Last night, AFC heavyweight bout, Chiefs and Ravens did not disappoint. Totally awesome. 36-35, an easy over, covered the over by midway through the third quarter. Mahomes and Jackson just traded blows on offense back and forth. This game had a ton of highlight plays. What stood out to you, Chiefs and Ravens?
Yeah, this one was just extremely exciting. Fun to watch. Anytime you get Mahomes and Lamar Jackson on the field together. We actually had Baltimore as a very slight favorite as far as the spread goes. We had it as a pick 'em, but we had Baltimore at 52% just prior to the game. So they were able to pull that one out. But in this one, obviously before we get to the big decision by John Harbaugh, right before that was the second biggest play of the weekend. It was the Chiefs down by 1 driving, 1:24 left in the game. Looks like Mahomes is going to do classic Mahomes, take them down the field. Go for that game-winning field goal. They're down 1. But then Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 2 yards behind line of scrimmage, fumbles, loses possession. The Ravens recover. Huge turning point, obviously. I mean, you don't have to be a football person or an analytics person to know that. But it cost Kansas City almost 71% at 70.7% of their win probability. This was our second most impactful play of the week, like I mentioned. And they had a chance coming up here later. Baltimore, like I said, got the ball back, trying to use up as much clock as possible, run it out. They got stopped at a 4th and 1 with 1:05 remaining. So in my mind, watching this, I didn't think there was really any doubt Harbaugh was going to go for it. He asked Lamar. Lamar wanted to do the same thing. The relationship, those guys, the trust they have in each other. I know we have the video from a couple of years ago where Lamar was like, "Coach, let's go for it. Come on." They went for it. They did it against, I think it was Seattle. But that decision to keep them on the field, even the broadcasters, were kind of skeptical. It seems like a lot of times they are. But this one was a 16.4% increase in the pre-snap win probability, which is our largest of the season. So far, only 2 weeks, but largest of the season. And so that was really awesome to see. And as we all know, Baltimore converted, went on to run the clock out and win that game. Lamar got his first win against Mahomes and the Chiefs.
Yeah, that is going to end up being one of the strongest decisions of the year. I don't think you get a lot of coaching decisions that are higher than 15% over the course of a season.
No, last year, I think Andy Reid also in week 2 had our highest of the year at 20.2, 20.21. We only had 2 decisions that really came close to it last year. So that one could end up standing the test of time over the season. But at the same time, we've seen coaches get more and more aggressive. But I wouldn't be surprised if that one stayed number 1 for the whole season.
It reminds me of the 4th and 2, the famous 4th and 2 by the Patriots against the Indianapolis Colts back in, 2009, I think.
Yeah.
And I think we talk about, it's really shown the way that how we talk about 4th downs has changed over the last dozen years, that they kind of questioned Harbaugh going for it, but they totally understood the idea of why he did. Mm-hmm. And they even showed some numbers from Next Gen Stats afterwards, like not in the moment they didn't show those numbers, but they came back from commercial break at the end of the game and they showed the numbers. So like, it just shows how we're all a little bit more conversant with the idea of 4th down aggressiveness now compared to a dozen years ago, when those of us who thought that Bill Belichick made the right decision what was essentially the same decision. The decision was, let's end the game now rather than giving the ball back to this ultra hot quarterback.
Yep.
Got lambasted as like the worst decision any coach had ever made. Things have changed a lot in a dozen years.
Yeah, and like I said, at the beginning there, we had Baltimore slightly favored, so our numbers were a little bit higher than those next gen stats. They were pretty close, but just because we're higher on Baltimore, we had them a little bit greater as far as going for it, and even on the punt, still a little bit higher. But yeah, it was cool to see. It's cool to see all that stuff kind of becoming more mainstream, if you will, and actually being shown on the broadcast. I know Red Zone throughout the day would have their next gen stats when probability popped up there on the screen at some important junctures of the games.
And I'll point out that by DVOA, this was a wrong team wins game.
Mm-hmm.
So Kansas City actually had the higher DVOA for the game, 19% to 8%. And Kansas City was particularly dominant in the passing game. Their running game was terrible, but their passing game was absolutely fantastic. I mean, first of all, Kelsey is Kelsey. So, I mean, what can you say? Breaking tackles, going something like 40 yards for a touchdown. But then when Byron Pringle is weaving through all your defenders and scoring, you know that the passing game is completely on point in that game. And that was a great play. And last week in the DVOA article, I introduced this idea of post-game win expectancy, which is based on certain DVOA splits. How often would you expect each team to win the game? And based on the actual performance of DVOA in this game, you would actually only expect Baltimore to win 26% of the time.
Yeah, and that doesn't really surprise me.
It definitely was but it also, here's the thing, it shows how making smart coaching decisions can overcome discrepancies like that. Mm-hmm. Like the other team may play better on a play-by-play basis, but if you make the right coaching decisions and you go at the right fourth downs, you can win that game.
Yeah, and we mentioned this, like I said, on our podcast we did this morning as well, our EdjSports podcast, that it was cool to see too the way Lamar, the pick six on the first drive of the game, it comes back, and a couple of different times in the game they got down 11. The second half, the Chiefs scored. It was the Byron Pringle, I mistakenly said DeMarcus Robinson earlier, but then Travis Kelce, both of them catching it in midfield, kind of hitting that left side with blockers. It just kind of seemed like the Chiefs were going to run away with it both times, but Baltimore hung tough and made the plays they needed to. And then, like you said, making the decision at the end, that's how you win games.
It strikes me, I mean, the way people talk about Kansas City really drives me a little nuts. And it drove me so nuts last year that I fell for it. The idea that Kansas City is unbeatable, that basically they're just lying in wait to come back against you, or they are taking a big lead and letting you fritter it away because they take their foot off the gas. Kansas City is a very, very good team. They are not unbeatable. Nobody in the NFL is unbeatable. I mean, frankly, the 1972 Dolphins were not unbeatable. It just happens that they didn't lose a game. But if you played another 14 games, the likelihood that they would go 14-0 in those games was very tiny.
Yeah.
Like, you need a ton of luck to go undefeated, and teams are all beatable in the NFL. Nobody is unbeatable. And people need to stop talking about the Kansas City Chiefs like that. They're going to lose a couple games this year. They may not win the Super Bowl. Like, do you want to argue that Kansas City is the best team in the league? Okay, sure. I think other people would say Tampa Bay. I would probably say Tampa Bay at this point because Tampa Bay is a much better, more well-rounded team. But if you want to say Kansas City is the favorite to win the whole thing, that's totally cool. But the idea that they're unbeatable is just, it's superfluous hyperbole, to use two long words.
And that's kind of the way it goes, and as we see in single elimination formats of playoffs, like going back to the Giants, the 2 years they won, I don't think anyone thought they were the best team in the league that year, beating the Patriots, speaking of the undefeated Patriots in one of those years. But it's just said you can have a team that's the best team, which is probably the Chiefs or the Bucks, but there's no guarantee they're gonna make it all the way and then win the Super Bowl. So yeah, I completely agree.
And I want to remind everybody, if you are watching us on Twitch live, please feel free to ask questions in the chat. If you want to ask about DVOA or any of the games from this week, we're here to answer your questions. But let's talk about most impactful plays of the week. We covered a couple of those already. For our audience, these are the plays that had the most impact on each game in terms of win probability, either positive or negative. So, Ian, let's go over the top 5 most impactful plays of week 2.
Yeah, so starting with number 5, Colts and the Rams. Colts were down 27-24, 3 points late in the game. At this point, Carson Wentz is out. We've got Jacob Eason in. I think this was the first interception. Sorry, 2nd and 10 on Indy's 25. Only 2 minutes, 19 seconds left. The Colts have no timeouts left. They're kind of in desperation mode here to get down the field. Eason's pass is intercepted up near midfield by Jalen Ramsey. That dropped them from 27.1% chance to win down to 0.6. So that's a 26.5% drop. And one thing to note on these is you said positive or negative. We always look at it from the offensive perspective, since they start with the ball, make the decision, they make the play. So this is a negative, or this is a drop, which is a negative change for the Colts there. Coming in at number 4, this is a game we're going to see a lot later on when it comes to our decisions. They've actually got 2 in this sequence here of impactful plays, is the Vikings against the Cardinals. Vikings were down 1, 4th quarter, coming up 3rd and 10, coming up on midfield, or just across midfield, sorry, at the Arizona 48 with only 1:21 left. Kirk Cousins hits Adam Thielen for a big 12-yard gain, extends the drive. Again, they were going to have to go for it anyway, or if they got close, knowing Zimmer, which is a little bit of foreshadowing here, they may have attempted a very long field goal for the win on 4th down. But that one was a 26.8% increase in win probability for the Vikings. So just nudging out the Colts there for number 4. Coming in number 3 was the Washington football team, the play we mentioned. Taylor Heinicke's pass intercepted. Won't really get too much into that one again. We know the Giants ended up kicking the field goal, but after that interception, Washington dropped from 78.9 down to 32.6, so 46.3%. Like I said, there are some weeks that could be our top decision. A lot of times it's in that mid to upper 40s into the 50s, but because of our top
impactful play, since that was not a decision. Well, I mean, it was a decision, I guess, to throw the pass, but
right. Yeah. So the play. So that one comes in at number 3, and then at number 2, we talked about. You can probably know what's coming here. The Chiefs down 1. The Clyde Edwards-Helaire fumble just was an absolute heartbreaker for Chiefs fans. It was 2nd down. Said they were driving down for a game-winning field goal. If knowing the Chiefs, they may have had a short pass, like we said, that they broke for 30 yards for a touchdown to win it. But that fumble there, recovered by Baltimore, dropped them from 78.9 all the way down below 10% to 8.2. So that was 70.7%. That's the largest non-kicking GWC or win probability change of the season so far. The young season, only 2 weeks, but second only to the Vikings. And we brought this up. This is going to bring back some bad memories for Vikings fans, but shades of Blair Walsh here. Stakes weren't as high, but down 1, 1st and 10, 4 seconds left. They're at the 19, just 4 yards longer than an extra point. And Greg Joseph misses the 37-yard field goal. The Vikings were at a 90.1% chance to win the game prior to that field goal. Like I said, just a little bit further than an extra point, and missed it, dropped them down obviously to 0. So that's a drop of 90.1% for number 1 of the week and of the young season.
Yeah, poor Vikings fans. Just an entire franchise history of bad kicking. It's not. If Phil Baggins says it's not looking so good for the Vikings, wait until we get to coaching decisions.
I don't think Vikings fans are very happy with their team or their coach from what I've seen last night and this morning.
Yeah, I mean, the Vikings, there were so many things pointing towards positive regression from them this year, and then just so many things have gone wrong from, health. And I'm not even talking about injuries. I'm talking about health, like with COVID, to just disagreements with the coach, to bad coaching decisions, to close losses. It's been a bit of a mess. The Vikings have the highest DVOA of any 0-2 team. In fact, the Vikings are above 0. They're slightly above 0. But just so
they were one of the teams.
Sorry, what?
Let's say they were one of the teams, I believe, in the post-game win expectancy there, or the Bengals at least, that one that were pretty low last week.
Yeah, and there are actually 20 teams above 0, because the teams that have been really bad this year have been really, really bad. So there's actually 20 teams above 0 and only 12 below. But Minnesota is one of the teams that's above. And if we are going to talk about them, let's talk about, well, we're not going to talk about them yet because we're going to talk about good coaching decisions. These are the best coaching decisions from week 2. These are the decisions that had the most positive impact on each game in terms of win probability. So let's start with number 5 on the biggest coaching decisions of the week.
Yeah, and it's important to note on these, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, that this is win probability increase prior to the snap. So at the point of decision, and this is what we call critical calls. So it's going to be on our 4th downs, deciding to punt, to kick a field goal, to go for it, extra points, onside kick versus kickoff. Most of these are going to be 4th downs, but it is, like I said, important to note that it is just in looking at a play call decision instead of saying, oh, he should have run this player versus this player thrown here. We're not looking at that kind of stuff. So coming in at number 5, we've got Bruce Arians, who we talked about earlier this morning, and we've talked about in the past. I know Frank, our co-founder here at EdjSports, have talked about leading up to the Super Bowl last year, is that Bruce Arians is hit or miss when it comes to his 4th down decisions. It seems like John Gruden was that way for a while, which we'll get to him coming up here soon as well. But the Buccaneers were leading 28-25. The Falcons made a comeback. Don't know if I call it a furious comeback, but they made a comeback to get within 3, down right at the end of the 3rd quarter, 29 seconds left. And Tampa Bay faced 4th and 1 at their own 41. This was just after the Falcons had scored to cut it to 3, I believe. And Arians gave it to Ronald Jones, who was out of the doghouse this weekend, it looked like. And that one was a pre-snap increase of 4.7%. Tampa Bay obviously converted that and gained another about 3% and went on to win this game pretty handily with some help from the defense later on. But that was number 5 at a 4.7% increase in pre-snap win probability. And then coming in at number 4 is our friend Frank Reich, who's always seems like is on this list of best decisions every single week. He's always near the top of our EdjSports coach rankings at the end of every season, top 3, it seems like. First drive of the game, Colts drive down. They have 1st and goal at the 1. They get stopped on 1st down, stopped on 2nd down, stopped on 3rd down, still have 4th and 1. Seems like pretty much every coach these days is going to go for it here. Like we've talked about, unless it's late in the game, less than a minute, all you need is a field goal. But throughout the game, every coach, it seems like, goes for this and should go for it. This one, unfortunately, didn't go well for the Colts. Carson Wentz was sacked all the way back at the 10-yard line, but the decision to go for it was correct. So one thing we say a lot here is it's about the process, not necessarily the results. If you follow the right process, more often than not, you're going to get a good result in the end, especially over the course of a game. But this one was a 4.8% increase in pre-snap win probability for the Colts, coming in at number 4. And then at number 3, we talked about Washington football team down 7-0 to the Giants early in the 2nd quarter. This was a 5%er. So it was a increase of 5% pre-snap win probability by going for it. And that number 3 and number 4 there, both I mentioned, are in the 1st and 2nd quarter, early in the 2nd quarter, midway through the 1st. To see numbers around 5% in the first half of a game is a pretty strong decision. Typically, even on an opening drive, the most you can really get is about 3 to 3.5%. So to see 5%ers there early in the game is a pretty strong indication of them going for it and that they should go for it. Number 2, like I mentioned, John Gruden. So the Raiders, he's been hit or miss, but over the last couple of years, it seems like he's kind of come along to this 4th down, whether he says it's just his gut or not. Maybe I'm sure he's heard all the rumblings of analytics and this and that. Not sure he's a huge fan, but it seems like he's at least listening to some of it, or it's gotten to him now. They were trailing 7-6 early in the game. This was at the end of the 2nd quarter. Had 4th and 1 at the Pittsburgh 8. So I think more often now you would see coaches still go for this like he did. But a lot of coaches I still feel like we see that would take a field goal here, go up 9-7, coming back. The Raiders got the ball, come back in the second half, may just want to go for that double dip and just take the points, the free points. Although as we know from Minnesota, we just talked about, no field goal is a given. But the fact that they went for it was an awesome decision. Derek Carr ended up converting it. They ended up falling back to, I think, 3rd and goal, like 22, and getting a field goal anyway, but they burned some clock down. Pittsburgh wasn't able to answer before the half. But this decision increased the Raiders' pre-snap win probability by 5.3%, put them just over 50% at around 52 at the time. And then number 1, we talked about it, so we won't get too deep into it here in this segment, but John Harbaugh with the just a great decision to go ahead and close the game out, put the ball in the hands of your playmakers, your best player, arguably the best player on the field last night, seems like, at least for the Ravens. But Mahomes is always great, but Lamar did everything he could, just put the team on his back. And this decision, we said, was a 16.4% increase in pre-snap win probability. Took them up to 89. They converted. Obviously, they won 99.9, 100%, whatever you want to call it at that point. There is still that slight chance, but John Harbaugh tops the list for week 2 and for the season.
So, the Gruden one is interesting because, we're judging by pre-snap win probability, not what happens on the play or what happens after the play. So they converted with the quarterback sneak, and then they jumped off with a false start. Then they had a touchdown pass eliminated by an offensive holding. Then they lost another 5 yards with an ineligible downfield pass penalty, and they ended up on 3rd and goal from the 22, kicking a field goal. So, just because you make the right decision doesn't mean things work out for you.
Right.
Useful Title says, I am just waiting to see if Nick Sirianni shows up on the bad coaching decisions list. Well, let's do the bad coaching decisions list, and let's find out. Yeah,
so the worst decisions, again, pretty much the opposite of the best, obviously, best, worst, but it's 4th down decisions where either our model recommended they go for it and they kick the field goal or punted, or our model sometimes does recommend people. This might be a shock to some people, especially those of us that follow us on Twitter, follow our social media, but it can be the model recommends a field goal or a punt and they go for it. So this week we've got pretty much one game.
Same picture 3 times right there, Ian.
What's that?
I'm noticing the same picture showing up 3 times. And thank you to JimmyJG360 for following us on Twitch. I noticed one coach showing up 3 times on this list.
Yeah, it was a bit of a rough day at the office for our friend Mike Zimmer. We're talking about you could say the field goal kicker let him down, but in reality, Zimmer really, really kind of botched this whole game. I know we talked about, again, on our podcast earlier, covered kind of seeing the reports coming out that Mike Zimmer said he thought the field goal was an easy one, should have made it. These decisions for him were easy ones. He did not make it. So coming in at number 5, Vikings leading 20-14, sitting there at their own 34. First half still, second quarter, just under the 2-minute warning at 1:54 left. They faced 4th and 1 and decided to punt. Decision cost them 4.7% win probability pre-snap. And there's a couple of these on this list that we're probably going to have, some people are going to disagree with. We have it every year, pretty much every week. There are decisions that people just underestimate your ability and teams' abilities to convert 4th downs, especially 4th and 1s. We'll get to some that are a little bit longer, but a 4th and 1, Minnesota 34. You've got Dalvin Cook. I mean, if he can't get a yard, I'm not sure, what to do other than, if he can't get that yard, but he's one of the best running backs. More often than not, he's going to get that yard. And we get people even that say, when it comes to the Steelers, which we'll get to, there people say their offensive line's terrible, or whatever team, their offensive line, we can't run the ball, even stopping us. You don't have to run the ball on 4th down. We've seen plenty of teams pass it. The Chiefs did it against the Browns last year.
I've seen the Steelers run short crossing patterns. I don't know if anybody watches the Steelers, but they do run a lot of short crossing patterns. You can do that on 4th and 1.
Yep, and the Chiefs last night had the one, looked somewhat similar to what they ran against the Browns in the playoffs last year, where it was a 3rd down, but kind of had Travis Kelce just right out in the flat and hit him, and he was able to get 10 yards. So said you don't have to run, but kind of got myself away from the point there, but still it was a decision that cost them 4.7, almost 5% again in the second quarter. That's a pretty big decision there. So we're going to switch these teams here and go Cardinals are the next one at number 4, Cliff Kingsbury, who has been very good. He was actually had 2 of our worst decisions of the season last year, but they came in the same game. If you pull out those 2 decisions, he finishes, I think, in the top 2 or 3 in our head coach rankings. But, he made the decision. So this week, they were leading. The Cardinals were up 34-33. They were at home against Minnesota. 4th and 9 at their own 40 with 2:21 left. Each team had a timeout left. This one was 4.9%. This is one where folks probably we're going to have some dissent here, people not agreeing with it. But with an offense like the Cardinals, you put the ball in the hands of your best players. If you punt, you're giving it up. You fail, you're giving it up. But in one of those situations, you've got a better shot at getting the ball back. This game was a pretty big shootout. But at 4th and 9, the Arizona 40, you're nearing midfield. If you don't get it and the Vikings do score, you still have the 2-minute warning and a timeout. Chances are you're going to get the ball back. Even if the Vikings get a field goal, you're down 2. All you need is a field goal to win. Even if they get a touchdown, if they go for 2, which they should at that point to make it a 7-point game, you still have a chance to answer and tie. You'll probably have a little bit, good amount of time left. So that came in at number 2. That was a 4.9% decrease in pre-snap win probability. Number 3 is one that a lot of people are talking about, and I'm sure you remember this one. Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh, down 9, 8.5 minutes left. Still some time, but it's 4th quarter, down 9, 2-score game. It's a 4th and 1. Again, no matter how bad their offensive line is, it's a clear go to go for it here. You need 1 yard. You're down 2 scores. You're running out of time. And this one cost them 5.6% in pre-snap win probability. Now, it comes in at number 3. You could probably make a case that this is the actual worst decision of the week if we're not looking purely at the win probability decrease, because they only had 13.3% win probability if they went for it. So that's over a third of their available win probability at that time. So I don't know what he was thinking, if he pretty much was just throwing in the terrible towel at that point, and kind of, I haven't really seen any of his comments from there, from that game, the post game. I'm sure someone asked him about it. I don't know if he addressed it, but that decision just, again, where I don't really even know how to explain that one, what he did, but yeah.
Yep. You got to go for the 4th and 1s like that.
Yeah. Especially with his play. Like, you've got Big Ben, you've got
when
Najee
you're losing,
Harris.
and again, you can run short crossing patterns. Like, you don't have to run the ball.
Yeah, you've got playmakers on that team. So that one is we're not always a go on 4th and 1, but that one definitely was. Coming back to Mike Zimmer again for the Vikings. 3rd quarter, 6:29 left, down by 1. This time they had a 4th and 1 at their own 40, a little bit closer to midfield than the last time, getting later into the game, still trailing. Chose to punt again. So just another to the list of his errors from yesterday that we'll get to. I'll kind of give you that total here in a minute, and y'all will probably, maybe not, but you'll probably be surprised at how high this number is. But this one cost him 5.8%, almost 6% there in the 3rd quarter. And we'll kind of just move on to number 1 quickly, because it's him again. 33-34, Vikings are trailing by 1. Vikings do still have 3 timeouts at this point, but 4th and 6 at their own 29 with less than 3 minutes left in the game. Kind of like we talked about, or like I mentioned on the Cardinals one, where if you don't get it, Arizona's pretty close to the end zone. If they're going to score, it's going to be pretty quick. They punted. It looked like Arizona played it a little bit conservatively. Kyler Murray helped them out by running out of bounds on the first play. I know they were probably wanting to score a touchdown as well. That 1-point lead, can't be too comfortable with that late in the game, really, no matter who you're playing. But this one cost them 12.4% in pre-snap win probability. That's over 2 times higher than what the largest error was from last week. So Zimmer said he's got 3 on the list here. He ended up having a total of 7 errors for 28.7% win probability loss prior to the snap. So that's over a quarter of a win that he just threw away by choosing to punt or kick field goals when going for it was the optimal decision to try and retain possession.
Yeah, the Cardinals went 3 and out, but there was nothing that said they were going to go 3 and out, especially given the way their offense had been playing throughout the game. And yeah, Kyler Murray made a big mistake by running out of bounds, and then he took a sack on the second play. Mm-hmm. But it very much could have gone differently, and all the Cardinals really needed was like 1 or 2 first downs, and they would have iced the game. So that definitely is a mistake by Zimmer, no question about it.
Yeah, and on the number, I think it was, I don't remember if it was the number 2 or the number 1. It was one of the Vikings 4th and 1s. I think it was at their own 34. Even a lot of the people I saw on social media were hammering him for not going for it. Of course, I think 2 plays later, Kyler Murray throws the interception, and you've got people playing the results like, oh, they got the interception. There was no, like you said, there was no way to know the Cardinals are going to go 3 and out. There's no way to know that Arizona's going to turn the ball over, especially the way that game went. There was just so much scoring in that game. And you turn it around, it didn't make our list of the best decisions, but that 4th and 5 that Arizona had in the game, where I think it was 4th and 5 at like the Minnesota 40, and Kyler just kind of threw up a heave that Christian Kirk came down with at about the 6th, was a huge play in that game. So it's just plays like that. Like we mentioned with Harbaugh, the coaches that make the right decisions. It's a huge advantage if you're a guy like Kingsbury or Harbaugh going against a guy like Zimmer, or even Joe Judge, who I didn't mention earlier on Thursday night, had an error of his own on a 4th and 2 field goal from the 5. So when you're going against coaches like that, it's a huge advantage for those guys.
And this is one where the Vikings lost the chance to steal one, because it's interesting, despite all of the win probability that the Vikings left on the table, they did not have the higher DVOA for the game. The Cardinals were at plus 13%, the Vikings at minus 7%. So the Cardinals did outplay the Vikings to get the win, but the Vikings had a chance. If that field goal goes through at the end, for example, I mean, they had a chance to steal one here, despite being outplayed, and they lost that chance with not only the missed field goal, but the bad coaching decisions.
Yep. And speaking of, there's one more that I kind of want to talk about. That was one of our more of a notable play. It didn't show up on our 4th down decisions, but it's what happened before the 4th down. I'm sure you saw this in the Houston-Cleveland game. That makes it so bad that the Texans had 3rd and 15, got 13 yards, declined a penalty that would have made it 3rd and 10. To make 4th and 2, if you're going to go for it, that's fine. You know, Houston, when I ran the numbers this morning, their win probability was like 0.2% higher by going for it on 4th and 2. But then he turns around and punts, which cost him like 3%. So that was, I think, the most perplexing decision of the entire weekend.
Yeah, so perplexing that there's video of Kevin Stefanski shaking his head like, I have no idea what's going on right now. What did David Culley just do? He has no idea.
Like, he just handed it to me, but I'll take it.
All right. That wraps up our worst decisions of the week. If you are interested in seeing more about these plays, make sure to check out the top 5 section on EdjSports.com and read the Risky Business column by Frank Frigo, who highlighted the Sunday Night Football matchup with 2 of the better analytical play callers in the game this week. You can find Frank's Risky Business article on FootballOutsiders.com or on EdjSports.com. And now it's time to preview Monday Night Football with your Green Bay Packers, favored by 11.5 points over somebody's Detroit Lions. Poor Sean O'Leary from Edge Sports, his unfortunate Detroit Lions. So let's talk about this. Interestingly, for the ESPN Best Bets column, where I'm proud to say I am 8-2 so far this year, I picked Marquez Valdez-Scantling over 37.5 yards as my pick for this game. The Lions last year were 30th covering wide receiver 1s and 28th covering wide receiver 2s. And Devontae Adams only had 36 yards in the first game between these teams, but he had 115 and a touchdown in the second game. Valdez-Scantling had 64 yards in the first game and 85 in the second game. So, I mean, the Lions secondary, especially with Jeff Okudah, we thought, Jeff Okudah will take a big step forward in his second year. Instead, Jeff Okudah tore his Achilles in his second year, so he's out. So this seems like a real shootout type game to me, where the Packers will take an early lead and the Lions will go chasing it. And I think the Lions are going to score a lot of points. Their offensive line is underrated. They were 5th in pressure rate allowed last year, 8th in blown block rate. And the Packers are missing Zadarius Smith from their pass rush because he's injured, and he was by far the majority of their pass rush last year.
Yeah, Green Bay, Detroit, last week, Green Bay just absolutely laid an egg against the Saints. We all know that. It was just an embarrassment pretty much, although Aaron Rodgers would say that he wouldn't use that word that his head coach Matt LaFleur used, but they didn't look good. Detroit getting blown out early last week. That one looked to be over in the first half. They ended up coming back and actually covered the closing 9.5-point line there with a 2-point conversion late that took them to 8 points. So a lot of
that was an awesome, wonderful backdoor cover. That was one of the great backdoor covers.
So that one. So like I said, like you said, expecting some points here. Detroit a little bit underrated, but what we've got, like you mentioned, the market is sitting at 11.5 right now in favor of Green Bay. We've actually got this, our edge fair value has this spread closer to 8 points in favor of Green Bay. Obviously, we still like Green Bay. We still think they're the better team. Even after last week, that we expect them to bounce back from that. We've got them at 75% to win straight up. Detroit at only 25%. Compared to the market, though, there is a little bit of value to be had in Detroit. The market was around, I think it was about 19% last time I checked. We're at 25. So there's a 6% difference as far as the price on the market there. Still a low probability event that we only see happening 1 out of 4 times, but that could still happen. And then as far as the total, the market is sitting around 48.5. We've got this a little bit under at 46. And looking at that 48.5 number, we expect it to stay under 49 about almost 58% of the time. At 57.5% of our simulations, this one stays under 49 points. So looking at the public money too, the betting markets, 71% of the bets are on Green Bay, but 51% of the money is on Detroit. So looking at that, a lot of times you've got people like me, going out there, just your casual people going at bets, but your sharps, your experts out there that are getting on it, especially here the day of kind of closing in, have had that shift that they've got a little bit more money on Detroit. So the market, the meaningful bets could be a little bit more, looks like are just slightly on Detroit over Green Bay in this one.
Yeah, our Football Outsiders picks also take Detroit in this one. We have Green Bay with the projected line of something like 10. So a little bit more than what the Edge simulation has, but the same idea that Detroit's got a good chance to cover this one. And like I said, with Green Bay's pass rush being really hurt, this seems like the kind of game where Green Bay takes a lead, Detroit goes chasing it, Green Bay can't rush the passer, Detroit gets more yards than you expect, they backdoor cover at the end. That just seems like a good storyline for this game, I think.
Yep, I agree.
So one other thing I want to talk about, which is I should talk about the game that I mostly watched yesterday. I watched the Patriots and Jets. I also watched the Chargers and Cowboys, where my feeling is, we didn't think that Justin Herbert's third down success was going to be able to, was not sustainable. And then it turned out that Justin Herbert's third down success from week 1 was in fact not sustainable. And Micah Parsons makes a really nice pass rusher. That's my other thought, I guess, about watching Dallas and the Chargers. There was one point also early in the game where I think the Cowboys were doing drives that were like nothing but runs over right tackle. Like all the blocking was by the right tackle, Terrence Steele, and the right guard, Zach Martin. So kudos to them for a great game. The Patriots and Jets, I have to say, as a Patriots fan, I'm almost more frustrated by this big win than I was by the tight loss from the first week. Matthews 1, by the way, says the Chargers got screwed by refs bad at the end with 2 touchdowns called back and some other phantom big calls. But their backup right tackle got roasted by Micah Parsons. Yeah, Parsons had a really good game. I'm trying to remember the touchdowns from the end of the game. One of them I think I remember was a little bit of a phantom call, but the other one I don't think was really, they had the short pass to Cook that was called by on an illegal shift penalty. But most illegal shift penalties are not BS. They're just dumb. It's dumb that you did that. Like, you shouldn't have done it. But usually they're called correctly. The Patriots and Jets game, I just feel like Mac Jones' average depth of target was like 4 yards. They've got to stretch the field with their receivers. Like they've got to get out the receivers to go deeper. They've got to throw the ball deeper. I realize he's a rookie and you're controlling things for him, and maybe against the Jets you don't have to do that, but I just feel like they can't keep running an offense with no deep pass routes, and that's frustrating for me. And Mac Jones
and James White
good. He did not look as good as he did the first week.
And James White had, I think, what was his first, or like his third rushing touchdown of his career or something. I saw he scored his first rushing touchdown.
Yes.
He's usually catching passes.
A lot of rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, he's got 3 in the last 3-4 years, whatever it is. I forget the tweet and the stat that I saw, but it was interesting to see that not coming on a reception for him.
Zach Wilson with a very strong loser league day ended up at one point. Zach Wilson had -6 points, but he ended up with 4 points. He got a lot of garbage time yardage in that game. So
I did pick him for loser league this week. Went with him and Matt Ryan. I was expecting the Bucs to shut him down, but Ryan actually ended up having a decent game.
Yeah, unfortunately, what you know, if you're playing regular fantasy, you get if you're playing regular fantasy, you get 6 points plus the 2 for the interception. So you get 8 points for the pick sixes. But if you're Matt Ryan, you don't get -8 points for the pick sixes. And Matthias 01 is absolutely correct. Any rookie quarterback against Bill Belichick is major fodder for the loser league. In fact, I believe that is the subject of Brian Knowles' loser league article this week, is going to be about the rookie quarterbacks against Belichick, because
and that was exactly my thinking going into it. So
yeah,
hopefully it's like streaming defenses in regular fantasy. Whoever's playing last year, the Jaguars, even this year could be the Jaguars. Whoever's just playing that worst team in the league.
But also it's the Jets. I think the Jets offense is going to struggle all year, but also it's just Belichick games plans these rookie quarterbacks really well. And I'm trying to think, like, he won't play another what other rookie quarterbacks? He may play Davis Mills, because depending on what happens with Houston, he may play Jacob Eason, depending on what happens with Carson Wentz's injury. But Eason's not a rookie, I guess, technically. He's a second-year quarterback. They'll face Tua one more time, although if Tua's injured, it'll be Jacoby Brissett. That'll be interesting to see Brissett go back up against the Patriots.
Yeah. I was trying to think of who it was that came in for him yesterday. I forgot Brissett was down there, but I remember seeing it.
But the NFC South, there's no rookie quarterbacks. And Dallas, of course, they play. That's not a rookie. So it's possible that Belichick does not play another rookie quarterback again this year, depending on what happens with injuries. All right. We're actually going to wrap things up a little early, because we've sort of come to the end of our day of what we were going to talk about. So I'm going to wrap things up a little early here.
Scroll on through.
Yeah. Be sure, everybody, to check out footballoutsiders.com and EdjSports.com and their analysis from week 2. Download the EdjSports app to get your betting preview for Monday Night Football and every matchup this season. Footballoutsiders.com. You definitely want to walk through. Now that we're hosting Mike Tanier's Monday morning recaps every week, you want to read the Risky Business column about Baltimore and Kansas City. Audibles goes over all the crazy wins. We'll have One Foot in Bounds later today with the college football review from the weekend from Parker Fleming. Tune in tomorrow, 1 p.m. Again, we're going to be doing now every weekday, 1 p.m. on Twitch. So tomorrow, Scott Spratt and Derek Klassen discussing players to target on the waiver wire for your fantasy football teams. And Wednesday is the Ask Me Anything show with some combination that includes me and Mike Tanier and who knows who else. You can find this show on Football Outsiders YouTube and on the Football Outsiders podcast network. Please do remember to rate us on the podcast network so that more people will find the show. And if you want to interact with us live, you do have to come to the live streams. That is where the actual live discussion is. Thank you to Matthias One, loving the everyday schedule. We're digging it, and we just have to get used to doing every day. It's a new thing for us, but we feel like there's always plenty of football to talk about. So it's not like we're ever going to run out of stuff to talk about.
We got an extra week this year too. So,
and I'm a professional. You can tell from the way that I completely nailed that last line. Thanks to Ian for coming on today. He'll join us again next Monday. We'll talk next week. And I'll be talking to all of you again Wednesday at 1 p.m. on Twitch. So everybody have a good day and enjoy Monday Night Football. May whichever team you bet on win. And may Marquez Valdez-Scantling go over 37.5 yards to make me 4-0 for the week in my ESPN best bets, because that would be awesome.
And may everyone bet on the Packers so that the Packers win.
Go Pack, go.
Yes, sir.